Today we're doing an AniTheory, and it's more of a speculative one. No need for quotes in this one, let's just have a bit of speculative fun. What if the Animorphs never rescued Axe? If, say, Axe was never on the dome ship to begin with, or he went down with the dome ship, he never made it to the dome part that separated. What if basically Axe just isn't a part in this series? What happens to the rest of the series? Now there's going to have to be a branching path on this one. So let's firstly go over the obvious facts. 1. Book 4 doesn't happen. So bye-bye Book 4, no longer part of the series, because that whole plot was based around Axe and finding Axe and all that. So that doesn't happen. And the Animorphs are never exposed to the insides of a dome ship. At least not straight away. Then we move on to Book 5. What changes here? Quite a lot, to be honest. So what happens in Book 5? Axe tries to contact the homeworld. And in order to do that, he goes to the shopping mall with Jake and Marco in order to get a few electronic bits and what have you. And then he goes, puts it all together and tries to contact the homeworld. But in doing that, there's a bug fighter plot, so he calls down the bug fighter and they get trapped by the Yeerks and taken up to the pool ship where they meet Marco's mother. One of the things about Book 5 is that there's a part in it where Marco basically says, I'm out. After this mission helping Axe, I'm out, I'm done, I'm not with the Animorphs anymore. And Jake's just like, yeah, I get it, man. And the only thing that keeps Marco involved in the Animorphs is seeing his mother aboard the pool ship. So, what happens if Axe isn't in Book 5? There's no plot. Because they don't need to find all these little bits that Axe wants to get. And because that doesn't happen, Marco never sees his mother, and he has no reason to continue with the Animorphs, and he is done. You could say that part of the reason he was done was because of what happened to him in Book 4, where he got almost killed by the sharks. But Marco had already shown signs that he was, his heart wasn't in it. His heart wasn't in it. So I truly think that Marco would pull himself out of the team. Would that even matter? Probably not. Okay? So I think everything up to this point is pretty clear cut. So Book 4 and Book 5 basically don't happen, meaning that Marco more than likely will leave the group. Does it affect Book 6? Not the main plot, because they don't need Axe or the events in Book 4 or Book 5 to take place in order for the Animals to figure out the plot with the hospital. So they would infiltrate the hospital and all that sort of stuff as per normal, get into Cockroach Morph, get into Fly Morph, and then Jake could potentially still fall into that Yeerk pool and be infested. One of the things about Book 6 is that it was Axe who spotted that Jake was in fact a controller. So, and the other Animorphs didn't have a freaking clue. They had no idea, didn't even really consider it. So Axe was the one that put a stop to Temrash doing what he wanted to do, which was to run off, inform the Visser, and have the Andalite bandits taken care of. So, and that's regardless of whether Marco is in this group or not. So what happens here? Temrash probably gets away, probably reports to the Visser that he's found the Andalite bandits, and the Animorphs will probably be caught. Not Tobias at first, but Rachel and Cassie and Marco will probably be caught, turned into Yeerks, and they would be used to lure Tobias into a trap, and he would be caught, and it's game over. Game over. Animorphs done. Wrap that story up. Without Axe, they are fecked. But the thing is, everyone, the thing hecking is that there's a little sort of significant chappy called the Elemist. And he fiddles around with a lot of things, and he wants things to go a certain way. So I we've done freaking option 1 now. I very highly doubt that he would allow things to go this way. How would he change things if Axe wasn't there so that the Animorphs could continue on their path to fighting the Yeerks? I think no matter the case, Temrash takes Jake. I think that can't be helped. But unless the Animorphs comes in and interferes so that they don't go on that mission, but honestly, I think we let that play out as it were. We get to the point where option 1 fails, and then we say, how do we change it from that point? And what I think would happen, sort of similar to what happened in book 7 with Rachel, where the Elemist forces into a dream, where one of the people in her dream sort of goes up to her and says, I don't know, what did she say? Something about butterflies. And it gave Rachel a eureka moment. And I think that would happen. So before the Rachel and Marco and Cassie got captured, regardless of whether Marco's in the team, remember, one of them would have that eureka moment of, oh shit, Jake must be a controller. Fucking leg it, tell the others, get them out of there. And so we'd have a similar situation then to book 49, but in book 6/7. Marco would immediately be brought back into the fold. How? Why? Well, if he's basically told, right, the Yeerks know who you are, so you can't live in your house anymore, and they're going to come for Peter as well, your dad, who Marco loves a lot, and that's the whole reason he went out of the Animorphs was to protect Peter. So if Peter's now in danger, Marco has to act, he jumps back into the fold. So we've got Marco back into proceedings, and we have similar scenes to what we had in book 49, where the Animorphs are rapidly trying to get their parents out of the Yeerks way before the Yeerks get to them. Probably with a similar degree of success. We'll probably have like a couple of the parents being taken, but some of them rescued. We've got to remember, by the way, that Dan hasn't left yet, so Dan still lives in the town, so they'd probably try to rescue him, but maybe he'd be caught because obviously Rachel's divorced parents probably can't get to both in time. But certainly the parents that the Animorphs live with would probably be rescued. Where would they go? Where would they go? Because we have no Hortbridge Valley at this point. We don't know the Chi at this point. We do know, however, that the Chi, especially Eric, are in contact with the Elemist. They know each other, they're bezies. And if you're thinking, how the frick does he know this? Which book was it again? Book 26, Eric comes in and says, I've just had a quick word with the Elemist, guys. I want to join in this mission with you. So we know that the Chi know about the Elemist, and I think at this stage, the Elemist would get the Chi involved. Because the Animorphs and their parents have nowhere to go. So, I don't know, maybe suddenly, as the Yeerks are about to enter Marco and Peter's apartment, suddenly bang comes through the door and they're saved by this mysterious android being who calls himself Eric, and he takes them out of there and brings the whole lot of them down to the dog park. And that is then where the parents and the Animorphs live, because nobody else knows where it is. It's a secret place, and they all hunker down in there, listen to what's going on above as the Yeerks try to tear up these old places and think, right, it's actually humans, not Andalite bandits. It probably means that the Yeerks will be a bit more, they'll probably be a bit more aggressive in trying to take human hosts. So you'll probably get little plot lines of going around that, but yeah, so that's where we're at now. We've got most of the Animorphs. Jake's gone, he's a Yeerk. He's going to be like a main antagonist now. Is that not cool? That one of the old Animorphs, the old leader who's morph capable, is now sort of alongside Visser 3 as a secondary antagonist. I think that would be pretty cool. But the Yeerks would now have a way of trapping the Animorphs, because they know at this stage, hold on, that Marco kid is one of these Andalite bandits. Marco's mother is Visser 1. So there'll be some stuff regarding that, probably using Visser 1 as a trap to try to lure the Animorphs out. So probably see a lot more of Visser 1. Whether that affects, because later down the line that might change things, so she probably wouldn't be sent to the United Planet or whatever, unless she's being punished, but yeah, we'll get to that. Now that the Animorphs are in Chi Land, instead of Axe being the expository character, it can be the Chi, because they learn a lot, they spend a lot of time in amongst the Yeerks. They'll probably tell the Animorphs about the Kandrona, which means that we can then probably have Book 7 take place, where the Animorphs venture into the Yeerk pool to figure out where the Kandrona is, and then go to take out the Kandrona. It might be made a bit simpler if they've got Chi. I don't know, because the Chi are bastards like that. They'll say, oh, we can't go there because peaceful programming, wink wink. So yeah, they'll probably be... Book 7 takes place just with a few of the pieces changed somehow. Obviously, Book 8 doesn't happen. That's no Act books happen, of course. Book 9 wouldn't happen. Why wouldn't Book 9 happen? Because the Yeerks were considering Andalite bandits, where they live, the woods. We'll use a lumber company to go into the woods. But if they think that it's actually humans now that are the problem, then they wouldn't do that. So Book 9 doesn't happen. Does Book 10 happen? No. I mean, you could still have the Pemalite Crystal plot, but a lot of the stuff where they find Eric, probably, obviously they've already met Eric. So a lot of that stuff will be basically incorporated into another book, probably where 7 was. Book 11 probably wouldn't take place because that book started when they stole a bug fighter, and they only did that because they knew Axe could probably fly it. So if they've got no confidence in flying a bug fighter, if they've never done that before, because remember, Book 5, they didn't do that, so they probably wouldn't be brave enough to go try to steal a bug fighter, so therefore they don't create the Saria rip. Book 11 doesn't happen. Book 12 wouldn't happen. Largely. I mean, the Jonathan Taylor Thomas thing might happen, but you certainly wouldn't have the crocodile... what was the freaking thing called? The DNA burping thing. That wouldn't happen because Rachel has to be in public to fall into the crocodile pit to save the kid, which obviously wouldn't happen, so she wouldn't have to acquire the crocodile unless we completely make up a new scenario, in which case she gets a morph that she's allergic to. Maybe, but I doubt it. Just get rid of Book 12. Books 13 through 16, I think, can go along as normal. I don't see any reason why they couldn't take place with the new scenario we've established. Book 17 is a bit different because that all started when they're flying around a music freaking thing and see Edelman jump out of a building. I don't think they'd be flying around music venues at this stage. I don't think they'd be doing that, so they probably wouldn't see Edelman. Maybe they'd find another way to get into that particular scenario, maybe, but I doubt this plot would happen. Book 18 is an odd one because it's an Axe narrated book, but I think it could still happen. Because Axe being present doesn't affect the larger plot points. That Book 18 is more about his loyalty and where that stands. Him being there doesn't necessarily change the plot. Although he is the last one to reach the thing to blow up the Lyra continent, so I suppose from that point of view. But I'm sure the Elmist would change a few little bits here and there to make that, sweep that under the rug. You see, I think 18 can still happen in one way or the other. Book 19, I think, can still happen. Book 20, this is where things get really interesting. David. Okay, so how did that book originally start in the actual timeline? Marco sees David in school carrying the blue box. That can't happen here because the Animorphs are no longer in school. So, would David still pick up the morphing cube? In which case, he'd probably sell it on eBay without the Animorphs knowing a thing. And that would basically mean that the Yeerks will suddenly start appearing with the morphing technology, and the Animorphs would be taken by surprise and would probably be completely fucked, let's be honest. They'd probably be killed again, so they're probably dead Animorphs at this point. Unless the Chi, in all their spying craziness, are actually the ones that spot David with the blue box, and they alert the Animorphs to this. That's definitely a possibility. So one of these Chi comes back and says, I saw the blue box. This freaking kid named David's got it. And so then we can carry on with that plot without the annihilation of the Animorphs. Phew, let's carry on. It's still very interesting though, because we can have the whole plot of saving David, but what happened in the original series? David went to stay in like Cassie's barn, and then he got fed up with that, so he stayed somewhere else. He had nowhere to stay. And the Animorphs didn't think to take him to the Chi hideout, but now they've got no choice because they're all down there. Or they could take him to the Hawk-Bajir colony, but they didn't do that in the original anyway, so whatever. So they'd have no choice but to take David down to the Chi hideout. And David probably wouldn't harbour the same resentment that he did in the books, because remember, in the books he said, I've lost everything. What have you lost? You've lost nothing. You've still got your families, you've still got your home. Well, now they don't. Well, they still got their families, sort of, but they're hunkered down in the same place where David is. So David's not going to have that added resentment. Does that change David as a character? He's still probably going to be an arse, and he's probably going to be, I mean, he might be an antagonist down the line, but I think initially he's going to have somewhere to stay with all these dogs. He's going to be in the same position as the Animorphs, basically. Obviously without his parents, but you know, I think that's only part of the equation there. I think the fact that they've got no home and they're all living in the same place would make him feel a bit more part of the team. He'd be forced into that team, and I think actually he would be less likely to betray the Animorphs. So you'd have another member of the team. One of the problems though is he does like to consider himself a leader. And this is where we ask another vital question. Since Jake's gone, who's the leader of the Animorphs? Probably Rachel, unfortunately. Book 37. We've seen how that goes. But that's more of a question for the end now on how Rachel does as a leader, whether things happen the same way. But one thing that can happen here, if David does truly become part of the team, he would probably push to be leader. And that's where the Rachel leadership storyline, the rivalry with David, would actually become one of the main parts of the series, that fight for leadership. Books 23 to 28 can probably still take place, even though of course 28 is an Axe book, but once again it's just like, is Axe really essential to the plot occurring? Not necessarily. The only exception to this is book 24. Probably wouldn't take place because they'll have the Morphin Cube down in the Chi Park. I don't think the Helmicrons are getting there. I mean, they could try, but I think they'd fail massively. So yeah, I don't think 24 would happen. Get rid of the Helmicrons. Helmicron's not in this particular timeline. Book 29, you'd have to change the plot entirely, but I still think you could probably have an Aftran plot in there. It's just, you wouldn't have the Tria Gland thing, because remember that was all about this Tria Gland that Axe had. Of course, Axe doesn't exist anymore, at least not in this timeline. And yeah, it wouldn't happen. You'd still have all the Aftran stuff going on, but in the background you wouldn't have this Tria Gland sickness, which didn't make sense in the main books anyway, so yeah, just happily get rid of it, honestly. Book 30 can take place, once again, with a few moving parts. Books 31 and 33 I've got down as not happening. 31 for obvious reasons, because, you know, Jake's not there. Oh yeah, there's just a quick little thing. 26 would have to have a lot of moving parts as well, because obviously Jake isn't there to kiss Cassie to do the Howlers thing, but I don't know, maybe that becomes a Rachel and Tobias thing at this point, so I think that can still carry on. Book 32, the separation, that wouldn't happen because Rachel wouldn't be on a freaking school trip. Book 33 wouldn't take place because obviously they wouldn't be in the school to begin with, nor would the Animorphs be at the community centre. I suppose you could find some way for this plot. No, you wouldn't, because the whole anti-morphing ray thing. Because the Yeerks know that they're humans, I mean, it could still work, sort of, but no. No, it wouldn't work. You wouldn't want to get trapped. The whole thing about Tobias getting trapped by the Yeerks is that, because he was an offlet, they're trying to prove that it was a stupid plot anyway, let's be honest. It just doesn't work, just get rid of it. 34 to 36, I believe, could still occur in some way or another. Book 37, no leader swap because Jake isn't out of town. Maybe, book 37 becomes Rachel, the leader, leaves town, And David, who's been trying to sort of like squeeze himself into more of a leadership role, finally has that leadership role. And we have a similar plot to 37, except without all the bullshit. And we see how that goes, and that, you know, gives him that confidence to be a leader in some way, and that makes more that's the start of David's eventual betrayal of the Animorphs in this particular timeline, where he thinks, I can actually be the leader now. You know, Rachel's not here, I'm the leader, I did a good job, and it moves on from there. By the way, this is about the time that Visser came into play, which is actually an important book in the series. Would it change at all? I don't actually think it would. I think you'd still get the same stuff play out, and Visser 3 would actually have more evidence against Visser 1, because he would say, look, your host is the mother of one of these Animorphs, so j'accuse, that sort of thing. So I don't think it'd actually change it that much, and you can still get the Animorphs coming in and doing the things that they did. Which means that you'd still probably get the Inspector plot in book 37. But would the Inspector, if the Inspector survives, then Visser 3 is basically fucked. So the Inspector probably still dies somehow in battle somewhere. Just I hope not in such a shitty way that it did in book 37. Book 38 would probably still occur. 39 wouldn't, because I don't think we've got the Helmicrons. So yeah, get rid of book 39. Book 40 can still go on, not that it's necessary. Books 41 to 43, so 41 wouldn't happen because there's no Jake. I mean, you might have a similar situation with one of the other Animorphs taking Jake's role, so possibly. Book 42, no Helmicrons, so that's a no-no. Book 43, if book 33 didn't happen, then I don't think book 43 can happen either. Book 44, that can happen. Same with books 45 to 47, but yeah, I don't see why not. 48 and 49. So at this point, maybe 48 can happen, but we don't have David in the same role that he had in the original series. So less likely for this one to happen. But I'm thinking at this point, you replace the return with like the climax of the Rachel or David leadership thing, and maybe this is the part where David gets taken out of the picture, maybe. Which leads on to later down the line, book 50, where they get the auxiliaries in as like we're losing numbers because we've just lost David, etc. And voila. Or maybe David stays in the group and maybe David is an official animal for the whole thing. I don't freaking know. Doubt it. He's a bit of an arse, really, wasn't he? 49 wouldn't take place because we've basically already had book 49 back in book 7. So we don't need that one again. Books 50 to 54 would probably still take place, but just altering a lot of stuff. For example, the Tom stuff probably wouldn't happen. You'd probably have a big Jake thing in there. Maybe they rescue Jake, or maybe they end up killing Jake after all this series being about, oh, we need to rescue Jake, the original Animorph, and maybe in the end they kill him rather than Tom. I don't know, but the further you go down this line, the more speculative it becomes, which is why I've just sort of zoomed through a lot of these books. But I think I'm quite happy with that timeline. So there's a couple of timelines there. There's 3 really. 2 of them end up in the Animorphs all being killed and Earth being lost. The third one is basically the same ending as we have in the original series, where they overcome the Yeerks, blah, 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 blah. Because instead of Axe being the expository one, the Animorphs basically live with the Chi, and they get all their expository stuff from them. The first scenario was, we got to book 6, Jake gets captured, the Elmis doesn't intervene in some way, and all the animals get captured and they're fucked over. Second, we get to book 20 with this new sort of new team, but they can't stop David because they can't find him with the blue box. He gives the Yeerks the power to morph, and the animals are basically fucked from that point on, unless you vastly change the timeline, but we're not going to go that freaking far. So yeah, what would happen if the animals never rescued Axe? I think they could still win, but you wouldn't have Mr. Cinnamon Bun, you know, livening up the place. Because let's be fair, Axe did bring a lot of charm to the series. And it's because of him, like, the long story short, because of him, Jake is in the team. Because if we don't rescue Axe, I don't see Jake coming out of this in one piece. He's probably going to get yerked. And I think Axe was essential for Jake's leadership because he was Jake's yes man, basically. It was Axe being in the team that... I don't think he would have been a very good leader without Axe, because Axe was the one that just did whatever Jake said. The others would often kick up a fuss, but Axe would be there just sort of backing him up and doing a fair bit of the dirty work. So I think, yes, they could have succeeded without Axe, but they wouldn't have done it with Jake. Jake would not be there. Jake would have been fucked without Axe in that team. And then you ask the next obvious question of, would the Animorphs have succeeded if Jake wasn't their leader? We've gone through all these books now, just assuming that they succeed in all these missions as they did in the original series, but that was with Jake as leader. If Jake wasn't leader, who would lead the Animorphs? So if Jake gets captured in book 6, and then the rest of the Animorphs are like, after obviously escaping the Yerks with their families, what do we do here? Maybe one of the parents says, I'll be in charge. The Animorphs will say, you don't have the morphing power, you can't come on missions with us, which would make sense. So that's probably out of the question. It wouldn't be Tobias. Axe isn't there, obviously. Cassie, no. Marco would certainly not allow that. And it would be between Marco and Rachel. And at that early stage, considering Marco basically just quit because his heart wasn't truly in it, it's got to be Rachel. Rachel has to be the leader. And she does have that leader streak in her, even though she's not a very good leader, I don't think. Book 37. Maybe we rewrite that freaking book. Yeah, Rachel would be that leader. And then if David eventually comes along, he thinks he's a good leader. It would become a tussle between those two, which would be a very interesting plot line. But would Rachel even get to that point with her aggression, her desire for revenge whenever she feels the need for it? She isn't as restrained as Jake. She's more impulsive. Would she have even gotten that far? Would the Animorphs basically be fucked if Jake wasn't the leader? Answer, probably yes. Unless Rachel pulls her fucking finger out and learns how to be a leader pretty bloody quickly. In the end, Axe was essential to the team because it paved the way for Jake to become a successful leader. And if Jake isn't leading the Animorphs, you've got Rachel in charge, and I don't think that would go too well. So in conclusion, the ultimate conclusion, I think if the Animorphs never rescued Axe, they would lose the war because Rachel would be in charge, and she is, sorry to say Rachel, no great leader. Whereas Jake was the perfect of the bunch, the perfect nomination of the bunch to be the leader. Unless, of course, the caveat of, unless Rachel learns very, very quickly how to act like a leader. But that's up to speculation. What do you guys think? Have my theories been fun, entertaining? Have they been correct in your opinion? Do you think it would go the same way? Do you think it would make this Rachel versus David leadership thing a major plot point? Would Jake become like a Visser in the background and act as like a second antagonist beside Visser 3? Would they get rid of Visser 3 entirely and have Jake as the main enemy, this morph capable human in charge of the Yerks on Earth? Who knows? That could all be fun. It's all about speculation. That's AniTheory. But AniTheory also deals with other stuff, but this fits into my AniTheory box, so it's going to go under the title of AniTheory. Go check out my other AniTheories. I'm going to link it on this freaking video, and yeah, whatever. Bugger off, the lot of you. God, get. Tell him Sean, he's behind you by the way, he's the cameraman. Sean Ashmore. You want to say hi, Sean? Yeah, here he comes, there we go. Bugger off, you bunch of reprobates. We'll see you for the next episode. Ta-ra!